Hey everybody, Zach here with Infernal Tool Technologies, and today we're going to be talking about nail guns. So the first one that I want to talk to you guys about, and we're going to start from the biggest diameter of nails to the smallest diameter. So we'll work our way through the different nail guns. But the very first nail gun that a carpenter is going to need if you're going to be doing a lot of carpentry work and you're going to be doing additions or building new homes or even just framing different areas of a house and putting some blocking in, it really come in handy. And the first gun is the framing nailer. So I'm not sponsored by Rigid by any way, but I just think it's a pretty good nailer. It's not very heavy, it's pretty lightweight, so I've just stuck with this one. But yeah, so the first thing about this gun is that it shoots 16 penny to 8 penny nails, and typically you'll be using the 16 penny nails to frame actually dimensional lumber together, and then you'll be using the 8 penny nails for your sheet goods. So you'll be attaching your OSB or zip systems or whatever you're going to be using in your area. But yeah, basically it has a compressible tip, and you can change the depth right here of your nails. So depending on the pressure of your compressor and depending on the depth here on the gun, will make it so that your nails are either going to be below the surface, above the surface, and you want them just below the surface. You don't want them sticking up, you want them just barely below the surface. So you're going to have to tune that in and hone in on it, and it's just something you'll have to shoot a couple nails to really figure out. But to rack in your nails, you just put them in on the bottom here, put it in your racks, and you just pull down and pull up, and it will go right into the sleeve there, and you're ready to rock and roll. When you're using a gun like this, you're going to want a pretty heavy duty compressor. You're not going to want just a cheap compressor that doesn't really have a lot of volume to it, so or else it's just constantly going to be kicking on and your nails aren't going to be sinking all the way. So if you're going to be using a framing nailer like this a lot, then you're going to want to actually spend a good chunk of change and get a nice compressor. But the next guns that I'm going to be showing you, you can basically use any form of compressor. I mean, if you're really nailing off, like doing production trim work, then you're going to want also another high quality compressor. But if you're just doing trim work here and there or certain things, then most compressors will work for these. So the next one on the list that we're going to go to is the 16 gauge. And the 16 gauge nailer is, over the years, it's become a peculiar tool because I used to use it a bunch, and now I really don't use it that often. And what I typically use it for is hanging doors, like interior doors. I will use the 16 gauge nailer, and also on casing on the outsides of the trim. So where the thick part of the trim is, you would typically use the 16 gauge nail gun, and then where the smaller, thinner part, where the trim is actually touching against the jamb of the door, you're going to want a higher gauge nail, because you don't want to split the wood because it's very thin, and this would definitely split the wood. If you're using this right at the edge of a piece of trim that's only about like 1/4 to 3/8 inch thick, this is definitely going to split it, and you're gonna have a huge headache using this gun for that. But if you're hanging a lot of interior doors, this is a great gun to have, because you can just set your doors up and you can just pop 8 nails on each side, and that door is not going to go anywhere for you, especially once you get the casing on there and it's properly shimmed. Your door is going to be solid. Especially if it's just like a hollow core door. If it isn't solid core, then this is going to really work wonders for you. But there is a lot of other applications that you can use this 16 gauge nailer for. Just it's going to be more of a specialty gun for you if you're doing more heavy duty trims. You're doing like maybe Fox beams and stuff like that. This is going to be your gun to go to. If you're just nailing up like colonial or ranch casing or in some baseboard around a house or some shoe moldings, this you can do without this gun nowadays. But if you're going to be doing some more high-end trim work, maybe you're doing some ram's head and some flat stock and some plinth blocks, and you're going to be hanging lots of doors and things like that, then you're definitely going to want to invest in a gun like this. And it kind of is the same as the framing nailer. It's got the compressible tip, and when you compress the tip, then you can press the trigger down and it'll actually shoot a nail. If you don't have the tip compressed, this isn't going to do anything for you. You can't just walk around shooting the gun. This opens on the top here because a lot of the times you'll get jams on these 16 gauge guns, or at least what I found with this Porter cable gun, and you can actually open up this area and you can actually replace this. There's a little metal hammer in there that actually drives the nail, and those can get replaced, so you can get that repaired at a repair center. So it's pretty cool that they have this on top here, so you can oil it up and get it working good. You don't want to oil the bay where the nails actually drive through, but some of these moving parts here, you might want to every once in a while just give it a little bit of maintenance and make sure everything's working well. Yeah, and on this side where you actually put the nails in, it's kind of the same system. You just put the racks in and slide up, and you're ready to rock and roll. So yeah, again, this gun, you can get away with not having this gun, but there is a lot of applications that you can use it for. Like I said, mainly interior doors. If you're going to be doing interior doors, then you're going to want one of these. You do not want to be setting your interior doors with the next gun that I'm going to be showing you. So we'll move down the list, and so what we got now is an 18 gauge nail gun, and this is another Porter cable. I just happened to get the set, and they've honestly done me pretty good. I've never had any issues with them so far. As long as you treat your tools well, they'll treat you well. And this is the same concept that they have on the 18 gauge, is they do have this spot that opens up. Oh, didn't even know there was a rack of nails in there. Yeah, but anyways, this opens up. If you need to repair anything, there's a hammer in there, like I said, on the 16 gauge right here that just drives through. Sometimes you have to get that repaired because it'll get bent up and jammed. It'll jam all the time, so they'll fix that for you. It's got the tip, the compressible tip, and you gotta have the tip down to press the trigger. Otherwise the trigger's not gonna do anything for you. And this one has an enclosed area for the nails. It opens the whole bay up, and you just put the nails in and just covers them up. There you go, and you can see right up here the nails. So once you start getting low, you'll see a little red piece coming up, and that's when you know you need to put another rack of nails in. So it's kind of cool. Tells you you're not shooting blanks. You can see the red, and you're like, all right, I got to put some nails in before I'm just blowing air through my trim work. But anyways, these ones actually don't have the adjustment on it. Some nail guns actually on the back side here for air. When you shoot the gun, it's going to shoot air out, the excess air, and you can actually turn the air whatever direction. If you're facing this way, you don't want the air blowing up in your face, so you can turn it away. This gun just doesn't happen to have it on there. Actually, the 16 gauge that I have has it right here. So this is where the air flows, whatever way you want it to point away from you. You don't want it to just keep blasting you because there's a little bit of oil in it too. But yeah, so the 18 gauge, this nail gun is the nail gun that I use absolutely the most. It is just the most versatile nail gun, and if you're looking for your first nail gun that you want to get, this is probably the one. If you're a finish carpenter, the other one is the framing nailer if you're a framing carpenter. But yeah, if you're a finish carpenter, then this 18 gauge gun is for you. And basically you can do so much with this. You can do trim work, casing, base moldings. You can even do flat stock casings around doors. You can, if you're doing like plywood shelving and you're putting cleats in and attaching the shelving to those cleats, you can use this for that as well. The holes that it puts in the wood are not bad at all. So when you're actually going into your spackling phase of your trim work or whatever you're working on before you go to paint, these holes are really easy. Whereas the 16 gauge nailer, it's got a little bit of pressure on it, and you're gonna blast a hole right through the stuff that you're doing. You're gonna have big old spots in your trim work, so it's just gonna be a little bit more work on those. But for this gun, it's actually not bad at all. On your baseboard, in your casing, you just put a little bit of spackle in there, and it usually covers it up in one go. Sometimes you'll have to come back for a second pass. But yeah, anyways, this gun, you can use it for so many do-it-yourself projects. You're just making small little projects at home and you need to pin something together, even just temporarily. Like if you're going to screw something together and you want it just to have a nice little weld before, so you can pre-drill and then screw. This is a good way to just tack it together real quick, and then you can drill your holes and you can screw it together so it's a more permanent fixture. But I use this gun all the time. Anytime that I'm doing trim work, this gun comes out, whereas the 16 gauge nailer doesn't come out every single time. This one, without a doubt, it's coming out. Now I'm going to be using it. If you're doing crown molding, you can do crown molding with this, or you can do the 16 gauge, but this one actually fits up to 2-inch nails, so it's got a pretty good grab to it. I mean, if you have proper blocking behind your crown molding and you're nailing right into it and you're doing a good spacing between your nails, you're gonna have no issue, especially because most of the time crown molding gets caulked anyways, so the caulk also just locks it all together and you're not gonna have a problem with it unless you're using some huge heavy duty crown molding that's very decorative, like a dental or even some corbels and things like that. You do not want to be using this for that. You would probably want to step it up to the 16 gauge, but just for the basic stuff you're going to find at Home Depot, this is going to do just fine for you. So the next gun that we're going to move on to is still in the 18 gauge family, and that is actually an 18 gauge stapler. And this gun is so great. I love it for doing underlayment. Like if you're putting Luan down, a huge thing that people are doing nowadays are the vinyl flooring, the click together flooring, the planks. I do it on projects all the time, almost every single job. If it's not tile, then it's the vinyl plank or hardwood. And for this gun, most of the time you're going to want to put Luan down before. And Luan is just a plywood that's super thin. It's like 1/8 of an inch thin. It's just basically a nice flat smooth surface. Kind of gets rid of small imperfections in the floor, and you can go over it fairly easily with your vinyl plank flooring. So this is great for putting that down. You can just fire off staples like crazy. I mean, this gun's really good where you can actually just hold the tip down, and if you're holding this down, you can actually lift this gun up, and every time that you compress the tip into the floor, it's just going to keep driving nails for you. So it works really good. Or you can do it the other way, where you just have the tip compressed the whole time, and if you have a rapid finger on this trigger, it's just going to fire them off. And I've put many floorings down with this, and it's never done me wrong. I mean, you just got to make sure you keep it oiled and you maintain your tools, and they'll do very well for you. But otherwise, what you can do with this that's really great is you can, if you're a cabinet maker, this is great for cabinet makers. You can tack stuff together while you're doing your joinery or whatever way you make your cabinets, but it's perfect for just tacking everything together. When you're doing the box frames for your cabinets, it's perfect to put the backing on. If you're just doing like a thin backing on your cabinets, you can just staple it right on there, perfectly fine. Or for your glue to set up, it's great for when you're gluing everything together. Tack it with this while it's setting up. And I'm actually going to backtrack a little bit. I just don't have one on me, but they do make 16 gauge staple guns as well. And the 16 gauge staple gun I use it all the time. It's actually on a job right now. I use it on basically every single job. And I do renovations, I don't do new build, so that's probably why I use it more. But every single job, what I use it for is refastening the floor down. Almost every floor that I come across has some squeaks in it and some imperfections. It's just common. I mean, everything was hand driven with nails that I usually work on. So over time and people jumping around and being crazy, it just loosens up those nails. And just going through if you're doing a kitchen or a bathroom or a whole first floor, whatever you're doing, if you just go find all your joists and you staple that floor down, the 16 gauge staple gun is perfect for that. You'll have no squeaks, and it's really gonna lock it in. They just hold better. You can drive them at different angles and really just lock the floor to the joists, which is great because you don't want to do a whole remodel of someone's home and then they walk through it and it's just squeaking. They're gonna be like, really? You just ripped this all apart and you couldn't have fixed the squeak? I do it a lot where I don't even tell the customer that that's coming with the package that I'm giving them. I just do it, and they don't even realize what they were missing out on. They're walking around and they're like, oh my God, my house is so quiet now. And that's because you just take a couple steps and you use that 16 gauge staple gun to really just lock the floor down. If they're having a lot more issues with the floor, you might have to cut stuff out. But if it's just minor imperfections, just wear from over the years, the 16 gauge staple gun is perfect for that. You're not going to want to use it for more finish work because it's heavy duty. You're using some thick gauge staples, and they're going to tear through some fine finish stuff. But they're perfect for some 3/4 inch plywood, 5/8 inch plywood, and things like that. All right, so moving down the line, one of my favorite guns of them all, and I added it to my arsenal, and the day that I did, it just changed everything for me. And that is the 23 gauge pin nailer. And we're back to rigid again, and it's a pretty good tool. This is the only gun that I have. There may be other guns out there that do this, but this is the only one that I know of where it doesn't have a compressible tip. So I could just be holding this, and it has actually 2 triggers. Let me get close in on that. This bottom trigger is basically the compressible tip. It moves out of the way for this upper trigger because right now I can't even press it, but if I pull that out of the way, now I can press that tip. And so this gun, I could right now, if I was hooked up to a compressor, just start shooting nails right now on camera for you. And so you got to be very careful with a tool like this. Even if you're just accidentally walking around with your hand on here and you press it, you could shoot yourself. Granted, the nails aren't very big that you're going to be using on this. They're 23 gauge, so they're very, very thin. And the max on this gun is 1 3/8 inches. So, I mean, that's still 1 3/8 inches. I got one in the tip of my finger. Not very far. It didn't penetrate very far, but it started gushing blood. So this is not a tool to take lightly. You should definitely be careful when you're using it. I'll just put that disclaimer out there. But this one's pretty cool. It has the actual tip that you hook the compressor hose up to. It actually pivots, so you're not wrestling with the cord so much. You can kind of get at angles with it, and the cord's not just getting stuck here. So that's pretty cool. So this is basically, other than the trigger, it's the same style. You're gonna have a sleeve area right here where the nails come down, and you just pop them up in. Oh, now I got it stuck. But yeah, just got an enclosed area, very tiny nails, so you gotta be very careful when you're putting them in here. You don't want to put them in wrong. It does on the top here have some hex head screws, so you can pull the top apart and do some repairs as well. It isn't as easy as the clip system on the Porter cable, but I actually haven't had to open it up yet and check it out, so maybe that'll be a video in the future and we'll see what's inside of there. But anyways, this tool is just amplified my crown molding game tenfold. I mean, that's basically all I use this for. You probably could use it for if you're like laminating something on, let's say like a cabinet or something, you could probably tack this on while the glue sets up, and you're not going to be putting big holes into it. But the only thing that I really use this tool for is to do crown molding. And you do not want to use this as holding your crown molding up. This will not support crown molding. The only part that you want to use it for is actually attaching the miters together. So they also make these clamps, which I don't have on me, but they're basically little teeth, and it'll pinch the miters together. So if you have like an outside corner and you want to get a really good weld on that corner, well, there's these little clamps that you can clamp it together, and you can have it on your table or your workspace, and you can just come over and pop, 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 tack it all together. Also, they make very good glues, 2-part glues that set up super quick. You can attach them together, and bam, they're just stuck together almost instantly, maybe 2 seconds to 5 seconds together, and it's glued, it's dried up, it's set up, and then you can sit there and you can tack those miters together. And I cannot tell you how great this gun has been. I mean, you can set up 2 pieces of trim, but I've even done 3, and you can tack them all together on the ground, on your work table, wherever, glue them together, tack them together with a pin nailer, and you can put this whole system up together on your cabinets, and then you can fully fasten them if you're fastening them with screws or with a different nailer. But having it all tacked together so you're not wrestling with the miter while you're trying to get the trim together, or maybe you put one piece of trim on and you're going to put the other piece of trim on and it's just not lining up nicely for you. I've run into that headache so many times where you have the perfect cut on your one piece of crown molding on your cabinet, and you're like, wow, that looks great. And you come in with the next piece and it's just the miters are not lining up. You're messing with it, trying to get them together, and it usually just drives you nuts. So having the pin nailer to just pin them together is so great. I mean, it really has amplified my crown molding game. And the best part about these pin nails is a lot of the time, as long as you're really dialed in on the pressure that's coming out of your compressor, this, I actually don't even think it doesn't have a depth gauge on it. So you can't even set, there's not a plunger on here, so that makes sense. So all you have to work with is actually the air flow out of your compressor into the gun. And as long as you get that proper, you don't even have to spackle the nail. It is that tiny. I mean, the pin head is so tiny that you could take a wax crayon and just fill that in and buff it out, and you'll never even see it. But you gotta make sure that the nail is setting all the way. So you wanna test it on some scrap pieces and make sure you're really dialed in, because there is a terrible feeling when you drive that into your miter and the head's sticking out, maybe like 1/4 of an inch, because you can't really drive it in with a nail or a nail set. You can't really drive it in. You gotta break it off, and it's just a headache. It's a huge headache. So make sure when you're using this tool that you test it out on some pieces first before you actually go to tack it together, because you really want it to set to the right depth to where you can just hit it with a wax crayon real quick and it disappears, let me tell you. Because when you tack your crown molding together and you're fastening it, you're gonna have to fill in those holes. So sometimes that can be a headache. It really can. If it's a certain finish that you're dealing with, or if you're doing clear trim, then it's really gonna be an issue. You gotta kind of work your magic and make that hole disappear. Whereas with the pin nails, they just disappear. So all the tools that I brought to your attention today are the framing nailer, the 16 gauge nailer, the 16 gauge stapler, the 18 gauge nailer, the 18 gauge stapler, and the 23 gauge pin nailer. Now there's other nailers out there. There's siding nailers, there's roofing nailers. I'm sure there's a bunch of other nailers that I don't even know. I can't think of off the top of my head, but these ones that I've showed you today are the essential ones. I mean, if you can put some money aside and get these tools, it's really gonna set you up for success, because you can basically do frame to finish with everything that I showed you today. You can frame a house, you can staple the floor down, and you can nail together the finished trim. And every carpenter should have these things, especially if you're working in a city or a state where carpenters are really just geared around doing carpentry work. Some places you branch out a little bit. Like where I'm from, I actually do a lot of different trades. I do electrical, I do plumbing, I do tile work, siding, roofing. I mean, I do it all. And it's hard to have a lot of tools to do all that work. But if you're just really working on being a carpenter and filling that role, then you gotta have all these nail guns. You really do. You gotta have these nail guns because you're gonna be using them every single day. And to be proficient and really save time and be cost effective, nail guns are the way. And nowadays they actually do have battery powered nail guns, and I just haven't actually transitioned into those yet, but I have worked with some guys that have the battery powered nail guns, and let me tell you, they're pretty great too. So all these guns that I showed you, they're air tools, but they transition over to power tools exactly the same. I mean, they have the 18 gauge, they have the 16 gauge, they have the framing nailer, they have it all in battery powered. And there's nothing different about everything that I told you in this video today. If you want to spend the extra money and get the battery power, then by all means, I think that's the direction that we're going. You see it everywhere. I mean, even roofers, it's at the beginning stages of it right now, but roofers are starting to use battery powered nail guns, not having to run 3 hoses all the way up to a 3-story roof. I mean, how inefficient is that? So it's great. We're moving forward with the battery revolution, and I think it's great. So many tools are coming out there. I love all these companies: DeWalt, Rigid, Makita, Milwaukee. They're all making great strides in the power tool sector, and it's great to see that. So if you got any value from this today, then please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and put a comment down below. Let me know about the tools that you use or any of the tools that I showed today. If you have any tips for people out there, let's just hear it. Put it down in the comments, and let me know any pointers that you have with the tools that you've used, or if there's other nailers that I haven't mentioned in this video. Just put it in the comment down below and let me know what you think. So until the next one, guys, have a good night.